Hello and welcome to your Fire Safety Awareness course. My name is Edwin O'Sullivan and I am the owner and instructor at eosullivatrainingsolutions. So many thanks for choosing myself as your health and safety training provider today. This course you're about to begin is very important for your own health and safety at work and the health and safety of your colleagues. On completion of this course there will be a small multiple choice exam, and then that will be followed up with a practical demonstration either live online or on site at a time that suits both you and myself. And if at any stage throughout the course you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. So let's get into it. Our objectives for the course: we are going to cover the legislation around fire and workplace safety, the costs of getting it wrong, we'll explain what a fire actually is, how a fire can spread, risk reduction that we can implement, what to do in the event of a fire emergency, explain the classes of fire and classes of extinguishers, and teach you how to use them correctly. So our learning outcomes. At the end of this course you will understand the legislation around fire safety and workplace safety, you will understand the natures and types of fires, you will know the duties of the employer and employee, you will understand the steps in how to reduce the risk of fire, what to do in an emergency, and be able to select the correct extinguisher to fight that class of fire. So getting into Module 1, the what and the why. At the end of this course we'll be able to explain what a fire is, explain why fire needs to be managed, and list the common causes of fire. So we all have a rough idea of what a fire actually is, but within a fire then it is chemically combining with oxygen. Okay, so the fuels within the fire are chemically combining with oxygen. They give off a bright light and heat and smoke, okay, and depending on the fuel and the chemicals within a fire, they can give off toxic gases and smoke which can be dangerous to ourselves. So why does fire need to be managed? Okay, it's a legal requirement. All employers are legally obliged to manage fire risk assessments within their workplace. It ensures the safety of the staff and the customers. It prevents loss of assets, prevents loss of employment, and prevents loss of life. Okay, so you can imagine if there is a fire in your premises tomorrow, you are going to lose your job, the boss is going to lose his business, and worst case scenario, someone may be seriously injured or lose a life. The costs of getting it wrong and when fire management fails. Okay, we all remember the Stardust fire in Ireland back in 1980s. Okay, it was started by an electrical fault underneath a seat which set the seat on fire. It resulted in 48 people dying and 218 people injured. When people realised there was a fire and they went for the exits, they found that they were chained shut, and subsequently they found that staff had no fire safety training. Again, this was another major fire that happened in Bradford Soccer Stadium in 1985. The fire itself lasted from 3 to 4 minutes, resulting in 56 people dying. This was a very avoidable fire. It was down to poor housekeeping and fire safety. There was no fire training given to the staff, and exits were locked underneath the stands. Another reason why so many people died in this fire: they didn't take it seriously. They stood around and watched. A lot of people that caught fire during this were on the other end of the stand, more than 100 metres away, which means they stood there for 4 minutes while this fire came towards them. So we're far more likely to have a house fire than we are to have a business fire. Around 20,000 fires a year are reported by the fire service for domestic dwellings. In that 20,000 there are an average of 30 to 40 deaths per year. The main causes of these domestic fires are 7,000 chimneys, 7,000 in cooking, 1,300 for smoking, 4,000 for malicious or vandalism, and 1,000 for rubbish fires. This is a very good course not only to have at your workplace, but you can bring some of the facts and figures and training you've learned today and bring it home. You can include your children in this. You can come up with a fire plan, a fire drill, make it a fun game for them, show them how to get out of a house in case there's a fire and what to do in the case of a fire. And if you do anything else today, go out and buy a fire blanket and a small fire extinguisher. It will cost you €50. So a quick recap on Module 1. We went through what a fire is, how it chemically combines with oxygen to create the heat, light and smoke. We went through why fires need to be managed and the importance of managing fire safety at work. And we went through the common causes of fire in our homes. Okay, so again, if you take anything out of this, bring some of this course into your house, include your children in it, teach them how to evacuate in the event of emergency, and make a fun game out of it. Get them to draw a diagram of the house and how they think they will get out of the house in the event of a fire. Moving on to Module 2, okay, we're going to cover the legislative requirements in this, which covers the workplace safety and fire safety, okay. So the 2005 Health and Safety and Welfare Act at Work puts duties on both you, the employee, and the employer Here we will cover the duties of the employer. The employer is to provide and maintain a safe workplace which includes all plant and equipment. Prevent improper conduct or behaviour likely to put the safety, health and welfare of employees at risk. They are to provide safe exits and egresses, okay, not to have exits blocked. Provide instructions and training to employees on health and safety. Provide PPE to employees. They are to provide a competent person as the safety officer for the organisation. They are to provide provisions of safe systems of work, and they are to maintain adequate welfare facilities such as toilets and canteens. So under the Health and Safety Act 2005, an employer is obliged to provide you with procedures and emergency planning. It states that they must have adequate emergency procedures and plans in place, provide firefighting equipment and evacuation procedures, arrange contact with emergency services in the event of a fire, designated employees who are required to implement these plans, such as the site safety officer or the fire marshal, ensure adequate training and resources are available for these, and have methods to inform persons of what to do in the event of emergency. So in essence, this slide comes down to training and preparation, having a designated fire plan in place, knowing what to do in the event of a fire, how to evacuate the building in the event of a fire, how to fight a fire, and how to call the emergency services. Moving on now to the Health and Safety Act 2005, the designated duties of the employee or you, okay? So you are to comply with relevant statutory provisions and take reasonable care of the safety and the safety of others, okay? Not to be under the influence of drink or drugs, submit to any appropriate reasonable tests for intoxicants from your employer, cooperate with an employer and comply with all policies and procedures, not to engage in improper conduct which is likely to endanger your safety and the safety of others, attend training and stay awake, more importantly, use correct PPE, and report all defects and improper dangerous behaviour to management. The list above is not exhaustive, but they are a legally bound document that you must abide by, okay? Because you're on a fire safety training course today, you will now at the end of it be considered a competent and trained person with added responsibilities in relation to fire and fire prevention. So the Fire Service Act 1981. The Fire Service Act sets out the obligation on building owners with regard to the fire safety under Section 18, and it describes a potential fire safety defect that could lead to the building being categorised as potentially dangerous. So potentially dangerous does not mean it's a building ready to fall down or collapse or be in a dangerous state. It is any building, new or old, which has the potential of a loss of life in the event of a fire. So this Act came into effect in 1981. And if you remember back in the first few slides, we had the Stardust Fire and the Bradford City Fire, all in around the 1980s. So it became apparent that fire safety was not a big thing back then, and local authorities and governments got really, I suppose, upset that all these losses of life were happening. So they came up with this legal document to put the onus on building owners and employers to increase safety and reduce the loss of life. So when the 1981 Fire Act was introduced, it called for all buildings to be fitted with exit signs and emergency lighting and notices, fire escapes and exits in case of a fire, fire extinguishers, fire detection and alarm systems. They said that fire evacuation drills are to be held twice a year at a minimum. Now this could be 5 or 6 times a year depending on the amount of staff and turnover. Fire safety training and records are to be kept updated at all times. Fire marshal stations in different locations. Now there should be enough fire marshals on site to cover illnesses, holidays, absenteeism, and you're to have adequate access for fire appliances and fire equipment when they arrive on site. Moving on to Module 3, which is all about risk reduction. The aim of this module is to give you, the learner, the understanding of fire hazard and prevention. At the end of this module, the learner should be able to state the elements of a fire, the common causes of fire, explain flash points and ignition temperatures, and explain how fire spreads. The whole point of this course is not to teach you how to fight a fire, but how to prevent fire in the first place. Fighting a fire is only ever a last resort. Prevention is always better than cure. The fire triangle. We all remember the fire triangle from our days back in school. Okay, it says that the fire triangle needs 3 things to survive. For a fire to spread and keep going, it needs 3 things. It needs oxygen, heat, and fuel. If we remove any one of these, then the fire will automatically stop. So in regards to risk reduction, we can't really get rid of oxygen. It's in our atmosphere, it's in our workplace. We need this to survive. So we have no control over the amount of oxygen that's around us. What we do have control over is the heat and the fuel. As you can see on the fire triangle, the heat and the fuel are very close proximity, which means that they have a potential of catching fire. One way for us to reduce that risk of fire is remove the fuel or the heat. We can separate them, we can move the heat source away from the fuel, or vice versa, the fuel away from the heat. And in creating that separation, or that larger separation, we have now reduced the risk of fire. Now we will look at common sources of heat. We all understand that a fire is a source of heat. But outside of a fire, which we wouldn't normally have in our workplace, we have many other sources of heat, such as smoking, electrical equipment, heaters, contractors' tools and equipment, arson, and welding and grinding. Below in the image we show a number of pictures which are a source of heat, such as candles, lights, heaters, kettles and hairdryers. One of the biggest risks in a workplace to fire would be electrical equipment, heaters and contractors' tools. The odd chance you would have smoking, getting out of control and maybe setting some rubbish on fire. Moving on to sources of oxygen. Like I said earlier, we cannot control the amount of oxygen that's around us, only if it's in an industrial setup such as cylinders. Okay, so the air in our atmosphere is a source of oxygen. In welding and flame cutting scenarios where they would have acetylene tanks and stuff like that on site, medical oxygen for the sick and elderly, food preservatives and packaging would have oxygen stored inside them. So in relation to safeguards around oxygen, there's not much we can do unless they come in an industrial bottle where we can remove them and keep them in a segregated area. And on industrial premises then we can have flame arresting valves or automatic valve shut off in relation to gas valves. So moving on to fuels and fuel sources for fires. As you can see in the office picture below us, everything in there is a potential fuel for a fire. What you would expect to find in your own area would be papers and cardboard, plastics, solvents, carpets and curtains, furniture and waste material. It is important that we can reduce the risk of these fuels interacting with a heat source by having a segregated area and removing heat sources from potential fuel areas. So just to move on and talk about heat safeguards and further risk reductions, okay? So within a premises, we can have no smoking areas or designated smoking areas. We can ensure that risk assessments have been carried out and their findings implemented. As an employee, it is your legal duty to abide by these risk assessments and carry out what they state. Ensure that food being cooked in a premises is always attended. Ensure that equipment is maintained and recorded. Portable heaters are to be avoided at all costs. These are a huge potential for catching fires. Ensuring no hot works take place without the relevant paperwork and risk assessments. So hot works will be anything in relation to angle grinding or welding. Ensure all electrical appliances are working correctly and that they are in good condition. If not, it is your legal obligation to report it and remove it. Now we'll go on to explaining what a flash point is. Okay, a flash point is the lowest temperature at which a vapour above a liquid can ignite in air. So we can all picture the fumes that come off petrol. Petrol can ignite at a temperature of minus 45 degrees, which means your body temperature of 37 degrees can actually set that vapour on fire. Looking at the picture here, this is a very lucky man. I think he's dealing with diesel more than petrol, but if it was petrol, he would be in a world of hurt at this stage. Moving on to ignition temperatures. So an ignition temperature is the minimum temperature required to ignite or cause self-sustained combustion independent of a heat source. All that says is once a material gets to its combustible temperature, which could be 50, 60 or 120 degrees, it will continue to burn once it maintains that degree of temperature. Moving on to ignition temperatures. So an ignition temperature is the minimum temperature required to ignite or cause self-sustained combustion independent of a heat source. All that says is once a material gets to its combustible temperature, which could be 50, 60 or 120 degrees, it will continue to burn once it maintains that degree of temperature. So moving on to our flammable and combustible liquids. A flammable liquid is described as a liquid with a flash point below 37 degrees. So we're looking at our petrol there with a flash point of minus 45. A combustible liquid then is described as a liquid with a flash point above 37 degrees. So a diesel, for instance, would be 52 degrees before that would self-combust and ignite. So let's talk about safeguards in relation to flammable liquids and combustible liquids. What can we do to reduce the risk of these catching fire? So we can reduce the amount of chemicals and flammable liquids we hold on site. We can provide proper storage in metal containers and metal cabinets. We can provide ventilation so the fumes can vent out of the building. We can have proper grounding on site, which are underground storage facilities for these liquids. And we can hire the services of a disposal agent and have these liquids ethically disposed of. So now we'll move on to fire spread and talk about how fire can actually spread throughout a premises when it does ignite. So there are a number of ways in which a fire can actually spread. So one of these is conduction, and this is the spread of heat through solid walls. Okay, we have convection, which is the transfer of heat of a fluid or gas involving expansion and movement, and we have radiation, which is the emission of heat from an infrared source. Okay, and then we have direct contact. This is where the actual flames will come into direct contact with a fuel such as desk, paper or timber. It's also important to note that with fire spread, heat rises. So if heat rises, then smoke rises. So if there's a fire on the lower floor, then the potential of smoke suffocation on the upper floors are high probability. Now we'll move on to Module 4, which includes fire emergency procedures and plans. Okay, the aim of this module is to provide you, the learner, with the understanding of what to do in the event of a fire. At the end of this module, the learner will be able to identify and locate the fire detection warning system on their premises, state what should be done in the event of finding a fire, state what should be done on hearing the fire alarm, and state the circumstances in which you should be able to fight a fire. So now we'll have a look at fire detection and warning systems. Okay, since the 1981 Fire Act came into effect, it stated that all dangerous buildings which have the potential of a loss of life are to have fire detection systems installed. So fire panels, break glass units or call points, which are the push buttons on the side of the walls. We have fire detectors, which detect the fire starting, smoke detectors, heat detectors and flame detectors. In more recent years, with the advances of AI, they are now able to detect fire through cameras. So your camera will actually pick up the fire starting and set off the fire alarm. In recent years, it is now illegal to build a house without any fire detection system inside it. So any house being built from a couple of years on, they now have automatically installed fire detectors and heat detectors in their homes. So in addition, if you have these on site, that is amazing. But it's important that they're serviced at regular intervals to make sure they're in perfect working order. So when they are needed, they work as they're supposed to. And again, if you have a suspicion that one of these is faulty, then by all means report it to management. Moving on to fire evacuation plans. As we mentioned at the start of the course, the employer is responsible for providing adequate emergency procedures in the event of emergency, that being medical or fire. Okay, so what should a fire evacuation plan have? It should have a primary and secondary escape route. It should show where the firefighting equipment is located, all or fire alarm call points, your location while you're looking at the map, all your exits and assembly areas. So we all have gone to hotels in the past, and at the back of our hotel door we have a fire emergency plan. This is great for us because we've never been in this hotel before. It shows us where we are and where our nearest emergency exit is, as well as all our fighting fire equipment and call points. Now we'll move on to fire procedures. This procedure is what you should do in the event of hearing a fire alarm. We will leave the building immediately by means of our nearest exit. We will walk quickly and not run. We will close all doors behind us. We will not collect our personal belongings. You will head to your designated assembly point, wherever that may be. You will report to the fire warden that you were out of the building, and we will not return to the building unless we are told to do so. Now we will talk about the fire procedure on the event of finding a fire. So what you should do is sound the alarm, call 999 or 112, preferably 112 as it is a faster system to get through to the emergency services. You will fight the fire if you are competent and you consider it safe to do so. You will evacuate the building as per normal fire procedure if it is unsafe to do so, and you will inform the fire warden. At this stage you should be making as much noise as possible when you're leaving, shouting fire, 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 get out, get out, get out, closing all doors behind you as normal. Later on in the course we will cover all steps on how to fight a fire and when to fight a fire. So we all know it's important when to fight a fire, but it's more important to know when we should not fight a fire. And we do not fight a fire for the following reasons. If it is bigger than a waste paper basket, if one extinguisher is not enough to put it out, if smoke is affecting your breathing, if you cannot see your way out or exit point, if there is gas or a chemical involvement in the fire, and if the fire is not reducing in size from your efforts. If any one of these points above are relevant to your current circumstance in fighting a fire or finding a fire, it's important to know that life is more important than property. Sound the alarm, get out, get people to safety. Now we'll move on to Module 5, Fire Extinguishers. The aim of this module is to provide the learner with the understanding on how to use a fire extinguisher. At the end of this module, the learner will be able to state the different classes of fire, state the different classes of fire extinguishers, identify what extinguishers can be used on what class of fire, and explain the pass system in fighting a fire. So what is a fire extinguisher and what does it do? A fire extinguisher applies an agent that will cool burning heat, smother fuel and remove oxygen so that the fire cannot continue to burn. A portable fire extinguisher can quickly control a small fire if applied by an individual that is properly trained. So it cools the heat, it removes the oxygen and it smothers the fuel. Moving on to classes of fire and our classes of fire extinguisher. So a class A fire is a free burning material of paper, wood and plastic. That's your generic stuff that lies around your house every day of the week. Okay, we have a class B fire, which is flammable liquids, petrols, meths and solvents. Class C is flammable gases, methane and hydrogen, etc. Class D is metal, potassiums, sodiums, magnesiums and so on. We have a Class E, which is a live electrical fire, and if we do not know the correct fire extinguisher, it can result in the loss of life or electrocution. And then we have Class F, which is for cooking fats. So it's important to know, for every type of fire, we have a particular type of fire extinguisher that will deal with that class. Okay, so we have water, foam, dry powder, carbon dioxide and wet chemicals. We'll go into these in further detail throughout the slides. So this is our water fire extinguisher, a very common fire extinguisher. It's identifiable by its red body. It's suitable for use on Class A fires, which are free burning materials, paper, woods and plastics. It's not suitable for combustible liquids. It's not safe for electrical fires, and it extinguishes by cooling. This is our foam fire extinguisher. It's identifiable by its red body and cream label. It's suitable for Class A and B fires, which are free burning materials, papers, woods and plastics, also flammable liquids, petrol, meths and solvents. It is not suitable for electrical fires due to its moisture content, and it extinguishes by cooling and sealing the surface of the fuel. So this is our powder fire extinguisher. It's identifiable by its red body and blue label. It's suitable for all classes of fire except fat fires. This is a good all-round fire extinguisher. If in doubt, go for your powder fire extinguisher if it is not a cooking fat fire. It works by chemically interfering with the combustion reaction. In essence, it suffocates the fire. So this is our carbon dioxide or CO2 fire extinguisher. It's identifiable by its red body and black label. It will normally come with a long snouted hose coming off the end of it. It's suitable for Class B and E fires, and it extinguishes by reducing the oxygen levels in the and cooling. It is not to be used on a Class A fire, for example paper and cardboard, because the power that comes out of this will just push the fuel that is on fire away from you and spread it even further. So this is our fire blanket. Every house should have one of these in the kitchen. They're the most underrated tool that we can have in relation to fighting a fire. They're usually red or white. They're for use on any type of fire, but best on Class B fires and cooking fats. It extinguishes by smothering the fire. Since the invention of the electric car, these fire blankets have taken on a new role within the fire service. They have them on site now in some fire stations, and they're approximately 6 meters by 6 meters. An electric car fire will take approximately 10,000 litres of water to put out. With this fire blanket, they will walk it up over the car and start walking in, surrounding the car with the blanket, and it will put it out in a matter of minutes with no water whatsoever. Here is a table showing the classes of fire versus the classes of fire extinguishers that are suitable for extinguishing those fires. Please pause the slide here and take a moment to review the content. So now we'll talk about our PASS technique for operation of a fire extinguisher. PASS stands for pull the pin, aim, squeeze and sweep. So we pull the pin on the fire extinguisher, We aim at the base of the fire, we squeeze the lever to activate the fire extinguisher, and we sweep from left to right. Later on in the course we will have a video demonstration of this pass technique. It's important to note that this is part of your practical demonstration when we decide to meet either online or on site. So now we'll talk about the steps we take in fighting a fire. This is our worst case scenario. We've opened the door, we've found a fire inside the room. We will sound the alarm and call for help. We will check our escape route. We will position ourselves between the fire and our exit. We'll ensure that the smoke is not affecting our breathing and decide if the fire is okay to fight. Is it smaller than a waste paper basket? Is it a chemical fire or gas fire? And is it necessary to do so? We will select the correct fire extinguisher for the fire we believe to be in front of us. We will implement our pass technique by pulling the pin, aiming at the base of the fire, squeezing the trigger and swaying from side to side. Once our fire extinguisher is empty or the fire is not reducing from our efforts, we will immediately leave the area by closing the door behind us and walking to our assembly area. It's important to inform the fire marshal of what you have found, the type of fire you believe it to be, and its location for the fire service so he can relay this to the emergency services. In our next clip, we will show you a video demonstration of the pass technique.
Okay, so I've just discovered a fire and I'm going to decide whether I can fight or not. So it's the size of a waste paper bin, my exit is clear and I'm between the fire and the exit. I'm going to sound the fire alarm. I'm going to get someone to inform reception that we have a fire. Now I'm going to select the correct fire extinguisher. So I have a choice between a CO2 and a foam. Okay, so I'm going to decide which one I'm going to use. So I'm going to hold the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze and sweep side to side. I have a number of choices to use, but in this case here I'm going to use the fire blanket. So when I'm going to use the fire blanket, I'm going to take it out as pack. It's usually hanging up somewhere. As before, I'm going to inform somebody that there is a fire and satisfy myself that I can put it out. So if I can isolate it, well and good. If I can switch off power somewhere, that's great. It's going to make the fire a bit easier to manage. And if not, I am going to take my fire blanket and I'm going to wrap it around my hands like that, protect my face and protect my hands. I'm going to lower it over the fire. I'm going to pat it down. Okay. If I at this stage it allows me access to some of the controls, I'm going to turn off some of the controls and I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it to do a fire watch on it. Okay, that's your.
So moving into one of our final slides, a person on fire and the procedures to put these people out. On the unlikely chance that you do ever come across this situation, the old adage goes, stop, drop and roll. We all remember this from school, but it's important to know that when we are rolling or we have someone on the floor that is potentially on fire, that they don't roll in a rapid motion. They have to allow enough time to have contact with the floor to suffocate the flames. So rotating in a slow manner is the best way to out this fire. Obviously this is easier said than done. A person is on fire, they're panicking, they want it out, they're going to roll as fast as possible. It's up to you to roll and help them roll as slowly as possible so it can extinguish that flame underneath their body. So we're nearly at the end of the course. Thank you for your time today and your attention during the course. I hope you've come away with some new skills and lessons that you can implement at home and at work. For now, we will move on to the multiple choice questions. You will have 30 minutes to do so, and on completion of your exam, I will get the results. After we review your results, we will come up with a date and time that suits us both to carry out your practical examination. This will be done live online or on site. This will include your pass technique and what to do on the event of fighting a fire. To practice for this practical demonstration, please refer to slide 47 on how to fight a fire. Congratulations again. I look forward to seeing you live online or on site. If you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. Thank you for your time and cooperation during your course.